Hello.
Hi, Father Winter.
How are you?
Good.
Oh, good, good. See, we have some guests on here. That's nice.
Nice. You should
Yes,
be
we're
able to share your screen.
okay. Great. Okay, yep, I see the option.
Okay,
Yeah, okay. I'll probably wait to share until I actually start presenting.
great.
I got to see, my mom will like this too. Uh, uh, Tuesday, I got to see my old composition teacher from before I went to seminary.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
he teaches at Sheridan College in Wyoming now, and he came to Nebraska for a jazz festival. So
Nice.
yeah, is Mrs. Mertz going to be here today? Do we know?
She is going to um, come on, but she said to go ahead and get started as she was um, juggling kids' schedules.
Got my paper printed out in case I need to reference it.
All right. Okay, so during your presentation, I will mute and turn off my video so that it's just you.
Okay.
Um, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll come back and open a time for questions.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Looks like we're ready to start whenever you are.
All right. Well, Welcome everybody to my musicianship capstone presentation on the inculturation of musical instruments in the Diocese of Lincoln. I will share my screen now, and you'll be able to see all the stuff. Let's see, let's get this into present mode. Okay. So welcome to my presentation on the inculturation of musical instruments in the Diocese of Lincoln. This was a really interesting project where I learned a lot about my own diocese and also about some of the stuff that needs to happen, or some of the stuff that we need to learn, rather, about this topic. So, I think the best way to introduce this idea of enculturation, well, we should probably pray. This is a church music presentation at a Catholic university, so let's pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so the best way to begin, introduce enculturation is probably with a story. I had the privilege of being able to go to World Youth Day in Madrid. I believe that would have been in 2010 or so. I don't remember the exact year. Anyway, I got to go to World Youth Day in Madrid, and during Days in the Diocese before the main event, we got put in a abandoned schoolhouse with a bunch of people from the Ivory Coast in French-speaking, or maybe not the French-speaking, but in West Africa. And they had all the priests at the time, so they were the ones doing our liturgies at the during this Days in the Diocese. And I remember very vividly one day we were in this church, small stone church, great acoustics, and all of a sudden they start singing. I think it was in French, I don't remember exactly, but they were making some really interesting musical choices in the tone of their voice, in the percussion instruments that they were using to accompany their music for the opening of Mass. And I would not have made any of those choices myself. Those are not things that I would have done, but there was no question that what they were doing in that moment was sacred. Even with the drums and the energy and the tone of voice that they were using, it was clear that they were doing something sacred when they were singing. And this is what World Youth Day is supposed to do, right? Introduce you to the universal church, and that was a really beautiful moment of that through the enculturation of music. All right. So, what is enculturation? The document from the Second Vatican Council on Sacred Music, Musicum Sacram, describes enculturation this way: adapting sacred music for those regions which possess a musical tradition of their own will be a question, in fact, of how to harmonize the sense of the sacred with the spirit, traditions, and characteristic expressions proper to each of these peoples. So the idea is that different cultures have their own ways of expressing what is sacred, and that's reflected in their music. Sacred, people from one culture might hear music that sounds sacred, where the music's doing one thing, and people from another culture might communicate what's sacred in music in a different way. And so the church has to be sensitive to this and be willing to, in a sense, adapt to what's going to communicate what counts as sacred in the different communities in which the gospel is preached. We might think of enculturation primarily when it comes to, mission territories, and that's in fact where the document, in a sense, puts its emphasis. But enculturation is a task for the whole church, and because cultures change, I think enculturation is an ongoing task. So basically, short one-sentence thing: incorporating when it comes to instruments, we enculturate musical instruments when we incorporate instruments that are proper to a culture, without using that which is only secular, right? So you wouldn't, even if you're enculturating a musical instrument, you wouldn't want to use an instrument that's only secular, or any other musical technique that's only secular. You want to use stuff that is sacred or can be made sacred if you're going to enculturate musical instruments or any other musical thing properly. Enculturation is not new. The gospel has been subjected to enculturation both in music and in other areas throughout the church's history. You could make a pretty solid case, and in fact, the church did so in a document in 1980, that the first instance of enculturation in the history of the church was the preaching of the gospel to the Gentiles that happens pretty quickly after Pentecost. Jesus was a Jew. He grew up in a world that was comfortable with the Old Testament, that had Old Testament practices built into their culture, but the gospel spreads to the Gentiles who didn't live in that culture very quickly. And so they have to, in a sense, communicate the gospel in a way that these people can understand. Not changing anything essential, but making it make sense to a new culture. The Greeks, the Romans, the Iranians, other people who received the faith very early. Enculturation gets a particular boost, you might say, during the Age of Exploration, after the discovery of the Americas by Christopher Columbus, and the sending of missionaries to the New World, but then also the Age of Exploration going to the other way, missionaries going to places like India and the Philippines and Malaysia and Vietnam and Japan. All of these places, the gospel has to be communicated in a way that makes sense to these people. And in this age of exploration, we get some very specific examples of music, including instruments, being adapted to some of these cultures. A first example would be the Jesuit reductions in South America. The Jesuit reductions were communities established by the Jesuits in South America, especially notable in the country of what's now Paraguay. And these were communities in which the gospel was taught, and also certain elements of farming and agriculture and other things, but also music. And in the Jesuit reductions in South America, music was practiced in such a way that there was a mix of Spanish and native elements, including instruments and language. And this music would have been used at both sacred and secular occasions. I'm going to play for you just a short selection of something from this musical tradition from the people of Paraguay. This would have been a song from the period of the reductions, written back in those periods, I think performed using some of those techniques. You can notice the percussion instrument, but also some European instruments being used here.
Father Winter, do you have the music
Oh, sorry, what'd you
box
say?
checked? Do you have the little music box checked? We're not able to hear
Ooh, this would
the
be in
sound.
Zoom.
It should
Okay.
be under audio settings.
Audio settings.
Let's see.
Audio settings. Okay. Do we want
High fidelity music mode.
high
Original
fidelity?
sound, original sound from musicians, and high.
Okay, yeah, that's checked. High fidelity music mode is checked.
Okay.
You might have to share your sound too.
Okay, where would I do that?
It should be in the share button.
The share button. Okay.
Yeah.
Advanced sharing options.
All right. There we go. Would that be under? There we go. Advanced share settings.
If you just click the green share button,
Green
there's
share button.
there's an option that says share sound.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay. Share sound. There we go. Okay. All right. Let's try this again.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
I just said thank you.
Okay. Um, So when you're listening to this, notice the use of percussion that doesn't sound very European. Also notice the use of European instruments, especially strings and woodwinds here. It's also kind of got this very repetitive structure that I think would be in the Baroque era, which is when this would have been maybe a little unusual for European, but perhaps normal for the Guarani. Can you hear it now? All right. A second example of enculturation in the age of exploration would be in the California missions in the United States. These were generally run by Franciscans. Many of them were established by Saint Junipero Serra, so long and holy tradition behind them. In the California missions, they were using whatever instruments were available to accompany the music at Mass, right? So even if they were singing Gregorian chant, for example, it might be accompanied on a guitar. It might have some native percussion accompaniment played in the local style. These people weren't able to bring in pipe organs as much as I'm sure they would have liked to, so they were using what was available. These would have been all over the California coast, and they probably did some of this in the missions in Mexico as well. So for this one, I have a selection from this one also. This recording was made by John Flaherty and Keith Paulson Thorpe. John Flaherty did give me some helpful advice on this project. I did get to talk to him, so that makes this extra special.
Dios te salve, Reina y Madre de misericordia, vida y dulzura, esperanza nuestra. Dios te salve. A ti llamamos los desterrados hijos de Eva. Suspiramos, gimiendo y llorando en este valle de lágrimas. Vea pues, Señora.
All right, so there you can hear, that's a Spanish translation of a classic Latin hymn to the Blessed Virgin Mary. You can hear they're definitely using some violins and other European instruments, but they're also using a very strong rhythm that isn't just a regular beat, but there's some complicated rhythms going in there that would have been very suitable for any kind of percussion. All right, one last group that's worth noting from the age of exploration here is enculturation into Asian cultures as well. One of the interesting things I discovered specifically within the enculturation of music into Vietnam is they had to completely rewrite melodies and harmonizations to fit the Vietnamese language. The Vietnamese language, the words change their meaning depending on the pitch of the words. So if the pitch goes up, it means one thing. If the pitch goes down, it means another thing. So, many European hymns, you have the pitches where the pitches, if you're harmonizing something, the pitches will move in opposite directions, or you'll have one pitch stay flat while the other one moves. But in Vietnamese, that doesn't work, because then you would have the voices singing different meanings of texts. And so they had to do a lot more parallel motion where the voices were moving up together or down together. And of course, they had to make sure that the melodies matched the text that you were singing. So I found this very nice setting of the creed in Vietnamese, and I don't speak Vietnamese, but you can kind of hear that it sounds vaguely familiar in the sense that, okay, here they are chanting something, one melody, no harmonization here like we might do when chanting the creed, but you can notice that like it doesn't go up and down in the same places. It's not the same creed melody that any of us who don't sing in Vietnamese would recognize. At least I didn't recognize it. But it's taking account of the tonal quality of the Vietnamese language. A little bit closer to home, we also had some enculturation work being done in the early 20th century in African American Catholic communities. There were composers even before the Second Vatican Council who were composing music in an African American idiom, using African American musical styles, instrument choices, rhythms, and that kind of thing. I have a selection here from one of the notable composers of this kind of music, which would have been, what was his name? Father Clarence Rivers. Now, this rendition of the Litany of the Saints is in English. I don't know when he composed this particular thing, but he was composing even before the Second Vatican Council in this kind of very African American style. I might skip a little bit forward because he does this little introduction thing. You can hear the litany itself.
Saint Joseph, Saint Peter, Saint Paul, Saint John, Saint Elizabeth, Saint Augustine, Saint Cecilia, holy martyrs.
All right. Now, of course, the work of enculturation is ongoing. It didn't stop with the statements from the Second Vatican Council. Bishops' conferences, individual bishops, and other people have continued to write and think about these needs. So in 1997, the Mexican Bishops' Conference, for example, released a quite extensive document about liturgical music, and they had their own things they wanted to talk about. So they wanted to remind their composers, their musicians, their performers, their instrumentalists to be, number one, attentive to the needs of indigenous communities. Mexico is not just one culture, but has its own areas of different cultures based on the different indigenous communities that inhabited it. And they wanted to remind the people to be attentive to the needs of those communities as well. They also wanted to give a reminder that even as they're doing this work, to not let the instruments overpower the voices, right? Even if you're enculturating musical instruments, you've got to do it wisely. So the voice, the human voice, remains the most important part of the liturgical music. The U.S. bishops also have continued to speak about enculturation. I believe the document is called Sing to the Lord. It's kind of the most current document from the U.S. bishops on liturgical music. The reminder that enculturation is for all sorts of people playing a role in liturgical music. That would be choir directors, composers, performers, perhaps even the priest himself. But that the goal of enculturation is to help us pray, right? This isn't just something that we do. It isn't just diversity for the sake of diversity, for the lack of a better word, but is so that all people can pray in a way that is helpful to them. That's the point of all of this work of inculturation. I also found a really nice document on liturgical music from a Guatemalan bishop. The Guatemalan Bishops' Conference has not released any documents on liturgical music, but they do kind of point to this particular document as kind of their special, the what they recommend people to read from their website. So our Mario Alberto Molina, in his delightful letter, the use of instruments particular to the people should be encouraged, applying the criteria of the relationship between instrumental sound and the human voice. But some instruments by nature are less apt or simply inadequate to accompany the human voice and to sustain the song, or they simply have the purpose of producing sound effects that distract from the purpose of the song, which is to lead the mind and heart to God. I think that's a really nice summary of what our goals should be in the incorporation of musical instruments, to lead the mind and heart to God, but also to make sure that they're good instruments for accompanying the human voice and sustaining the song. This particular bishop had some very, you might say, uniquely Guatemalan recommendations for musical instruments that might not necessarily apply to us here in Nebraska, but I think the principle that he's outlining here is very sound. All right, so the Diocese of Lincoln specifically. So my particular project was a study of the inculturation of musical instruments in the Diocese of Lincoln. So I wanted to determine, okay, how are we doing in the Diocese of Lincoln when it comes to using musical instruments that meet these goals, that are attentive to the different cultures that we have, but also are used in such a way that supports singing, raise the mind and heart to God, and other such things. So the Diocese of Lincoln is a large, geographically large, but very rural diocese in the southern part of Nebraska. You can see it outlined on the screen here. It's the area in red, south of the south bank of the South Fork of the Platte River. The Cathedral of the Diocese of Lincoln is marked in the eastern part of the diocese by that ball and cross that you can see. That's the city of Lincoln itself. And then my particular parish is right in the middle. I have a little thing here that says you are screen sharing that covers right where I live. I'm putting my mouse over it if you can see that. That's where my parish is in the outline of the Diocese of Lincoln. So right there in the middle. So yeah, it's very, very rural. To measure the inculturation of musical instruments in the Diocese of Lincoln, I got to go back here. I designed a survey. So this survey was distributed in various ways. So first of all, we had it sent out to all of the pastors of the diocese with a request for them to either fill it out themselves or forwarded it on to their music directors at their parishes. And then I also shared it on social media and encouraged the people on social media to share it with others. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the survey so you can see what questions were asked, how the survey flowed. The survey was constructed in such a way that depending on what answers you gave, different screens would show up later on. So not everything that are going to see showed up for everyone, and I'll tell you clearly what those parts were. So the first question, I asked people what survey they would like to take the language in: English, Spanish, French, Vietnamese, or Arabic. Unfortunately, I never managed to get the survey translated into French, Vietnamese, or Arabic. I don't speak those languages, even though they are relevant to the Diocese of Lincoln. We have a pretty large population of Vietnamese, many of whom came over as refugees during the main stage of Vietnamese migration. We also resettle a lot of refugees in the Lincoln area even now. And many of the Catholic refugees are from Africa, either French-speaking Africa, or there's also quite a few Arabic-speaking South Sudanese refugees who are Catholic. So those were the languages I wanted to make the survey available in. Like I said, we only got it done in English and Spanish. So based on how you answered this question, if you answered it in English, you would get the English version of the survey. If you answered it in Spanish, you'd get the Spanish version of the survey. If you clicked one of the other questions, it would just take you to the survey end screen, and you were done. All right, so the second question, I asked them to state their religious affiliation. We did not get any non-Catholic respondents. The survey didn't get spread widely enough. We did get one person who said they were Eastern Catholic / Eastern Orthodox. However, they also said they were Vietnamese. So I wonder if that was maybe just a misunderstanding. Everyone else who took the survey checked the Roman Catholic box. Then they were able to check what linguistic or cultural community they identified with. So even if they were taking the survey in English, they of course had the option to check boxes for Hispanic or Latino or Vietnamese or other such categories. So that was an option there to kind of give us that demographic data. There was an option where they could describe their level of musical education, self-taught music lessons, or have a degree in music and or liturgy. This was one of Dr. Flaherty's suggestions, I think. They were then able to say where they live or attended church services. While the study was focusing primarily on the Diocese of Lincoln, I did know that there would probably be a little bit of spillover. And the other dioceses in Nebraska aren't too far away. I only live 20 miles away from a major population center in the Diocese of Grand Island. So there's a lot of going back and forth between the different dioceses. So they were able to say where they were from. Most of our respondents were from the Diocese of Lincoln, but not all of them. Then they were able to check what languages they go to church services in. They can mention any of these languages. They could check all the boxes if they went to Mass in all those languages. So there was that option. They were able. They were able to say what their role was in the parish's musical environment. There was a special section of the survey that you would only get if you checked the pastor or music director box. And the idea behind this was that we wanted to get a sense of what ensembles are being used at the masses in our parishes in our diocese. And so we didn't want to get a whole bunch of duplicates. So that part of the survey only came up if you checked pastor or music director. The idea was we wanted to get as many parishes to respond to that as possible. So that was this next question. For all of these questions, these would come up if you check the pastor and music director box, where you could say at what Mass each instrument was played, so we get an idea of, okay, what gets played with what. In the actual survey, this was laid out in a grid form. It was not in the form that you see here. It was in a grid form. So it was a vertical column that was all the different instruments, and then a horizontal row that was all the different Mass time options: Saturday evening, Sunday early morning, Sunday mid-morning, Sunday noonish, Sunday evening, and other. And then you would just check all the boxes that applied. So it was a lot more convenient than this survey makes it look.
Excuse
Yes.
me, Father Winter. We're still seeing just the survey.
You are not okay.
You
Let
need
me
to
fix
switch.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Can you see it now? There you go. Okay. So just so you can see what I was talking through, here's the preferred language screen that only ended up in English and Spanish, religious affiliation, linguistic or cultural community, level of musical education, where you live, language you attend church services in, role in your parish's musical environment. And then this was the part that was only for pastors and music directors. This was the part that was laid out as a grid rather than what you see here. Vertical column of instruments, horizontal row at the top of the different Mass time options, and then you would check the boxes that corresponded to your parish if you were a pastor or music director. Okay, so we'll scroll through all of those. There were a lot of instruments included on this survey. All right, so then everyone was then directed to this screen, which was what instruments have you heard played at Mass, either at your parish or elsewhere, check all that apply. So this was, to get a sense of, okay, what we get it. The previous question talks about what the ensembles are. This question was to try to get people's reactions to different instruments. So first they were to check what instruments they heard. Most of the instruments on here are kind of your pretty standard Western orchestra instruments, violin, viola, woodwinds, brass, percussion, that kind of stuff. With, of course, the addition of your, your church keyboard instruments, pipe organ, jazz organ, piano, electric keyboard. I had to put the accordion in there. And then a few instruments that I put in because I thought that they would probably be used in some of the other cultures. So like the vihuela and the guitarron are Mexican plucked string instruments. The guitar is in here, of course. And then some options for Chinese and Vietnamese plucked strings and flutes and reed winds to give people lots of options as to what they might have heard. There was also another option. We didn't get a whole lot in there. Then, for each instrument where someone checked the box, they would see this question. Okay? For the following questions, for each instrument displayed, rate how it helps you pray. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is very distracting, 5 is very helpful. And then rate how well you usually hear it played in church. 1 is badly, 5 is very well, trying to get some sense of, okay, are people actually good at playing these things? And then they had a space where they could write some words, say what it makes you think of when you hear it played in church. If you've never heard this instrument played in church, if they marked it by mistake, they can just click next. So the idea is number 1, does this help them pray? Right? If the whole point of Inculturation is to get people to lift their minds and hearts to God, and we want instruments to help with that, well, let's find out, is it actually helping? Do people think it's actually helping? Then we wanted to get a sense of, okay, is it being played well? And then a sense of, okay, what's going on in these people's heads? What do they think of when they hear this instrument? What are the associations, you might say? Then at the very end of the survey, once we got through all of those, this is just the Spanish survey at the bottom, people could list instruments they wanted to hear but didn't hear at Mass, instruments that they heard but thought were inappropriate, and then for pastors and music directors, they could also answer if they had ever promoted or banned a specific instrument at their parish. So those were the questions that were asked to people that took this survey. All right, we will go back to the PowerPoint option. There we go. Okay, I think you can all see can you all see there you go. Okay. So the Diocese of Lincoln, how representative were we? The Diocese of Lincoln has a total population of 75,956 Catholics. I estimated our Hispanic and Latino population to be from 11.1% to 16.4%. That's based on which parishes in the diocese actually have a Spanish Mass and how big those parishes are. I've estimated that 3.3% of our diocese is Vietnamese, also based on what parishes have a Vietnamese Mass. And then I estimated that 9.9% of our diocese belongs to a parish which has access to the Latin Mass. That doesn't necessarily reflect how many go. That's just, okay, they're a member of the parish that has it, or an oratory that has it. Have no idea how many members of those parishes actually go. So anyway, so we had a total of 82 respondents, or 0.1% of the total diocesan population. 24.3% of those respondents were Hispanic or Latino. One respondent was Vietnamese. That was not enough for any kind of useful analysis, so I ended up not even, in my analysis of the survey results, we won't even really be looking at the Vietnamese response. 28.6% were from outside of the Diocese of Lincoln, but most of those were still from another diocese in Nebraska. 31.8% of the respondents from the diocese attended the Latin Mass at least sometimes, and 28% of the parishes, up to 28% of the parishes, responded to give what ensembles were being used at their parish. I say up to 28 because we might have gotten a few duplicates. Perhaps the pastor and the music director both filled out that section for their parish. So 28% would be if every single person who claimed to be the pastor or the music director was from a different parish. But there's no way of knowing that. So as you can see, our Hispanic or Latino response rate was pretty good, possibly higher than what the diocese actually is. Our Vietnamese response rate was very bad. We did not get nearly enough detail with that. And our Latin Mass response rate was disproportionately high compared to that percentage of the diocese. All right. Now, our director for Hispanic ministry for the diocese estimated that our Hispanic or Latino population of the diocese was as high as 44%. However, I do not think that that is an accurate estimate. He based it on, okay, this is what the U.S. Census says Nebraska is. The diocese is this much, has this many people in it. So if this percent of them is Hispanic and this percent of Hispanics are Catholic, this is the percentage of the diocese is going to be Hispanic. Now, what I have here is a map of the U.S. Census with the counties that have Hispanic or Latino population where it's above a certain percent highlighted with a darker green. So as you can see, a lot of our Hispanic or Latino population centers are just north of the boundary between the Diocese of Lincoln in the southern part of the state and the other parts of the state. That green part off to the left of the map is outside the diocese. It's in the state of Colorado. We definitely have our centers, we definitely have our parts, but a lot of those population centers are north of the border. And so I think that estimate of 44% is a lot higher. I chose to go with my own estimate of more like 11 to 16% of the diocese being Hispanic or Latino based on where our masses are. All right, so getting into the results of the survey. So first of all, what ensembles, what instruments are we using in the diocese, at least on a regular basis, based on the response of this survey? So first of all, 70.9% of our parish, of the ensembles being used in the diocese, according to the survey, once again, it's only 28% as a maximum of the parishes, but 70.9% of these ensembles are just some kind of keyboard. Most commonly the organ by itself, but also organ and or piano alone, or electric keyboard or jazz organ with or without other keyboards, right? So some kind of keyboard by itself, no other instruments, makes up 70.9% of the ensembles discovered in this survey. 12.9% of the ensembles were a guitar or a guitar and one other instrument. That other instrument could be a keyboard. It could also be something like a flute or a violin or something like that. So this is kind of our other big instrument. Keyboard alone or guitar alone or with one other instrument makes up a really large proportion of what's being used in our diocese. And then 18.8 of the ensembles used some other kind of instrument. Generally, this was woodwinds or brass or bowed strings, so your violins, your violas, your cellos, your bowed double basses. So these are the most common. These are the most common instrumental ensembles that were reported. So then we looked at, people have rated these instruments based on how helpful they are to their prayer, right? So how much of that has to do with how well the instrument is played, okay? So for purposes of this, I'm defining an instrument that was rated helpfully as if someone gave it a rating of a 4 or a 5. And an unhelpful instrument is one that got a rating of a 1 or a 2. A rating of a 3, that's neutral. It's not neither helpful nor unhelpful. So 47% of responses had a rating where how helpful it was on 1 to 5 was the same as how well it was played 1 to 5, right? So if 47% of the responses, if they rated the instrument as a 5, they were also rating the skill level as a 5. If they rated the instrument as a 2, they were also rating the skill level as a 2. So, that's a 47% of all responses when you have, 5 options for your skill and 5 options for your helpfulness. That's a significant number there. Let's see. Another correlation I looked at was, okay, let's take a look at those things that the instruments are associated with, right? Because people were saying all kinds of things, right? They might have said something like, okay, this instrument makes me think of angels. This instrument makes me think of God. This instrument makes me think of peace. This instrument makes me think of a concert. This instrument makes me think of a bar. These are all actual responses that people gave. There were lots and lots of different things that people put in that "what does this instrument make you think of" box. So there was a pretty high correlation between okay, if what was put in that box was sacred or secular. There was a very high correlation to, okay, is it distracting or helpful? So if someone put something sacred in that box, like God or angels or anything churchy, right, 84.3% of the time, it was also rated as helpful, 4 or 5. On the other hand, if someone put a secular word in that box, and I was pretty strict with the meaning of secular here. This would have been things like a bar or, hippies or, something where it wasn't just, oh, this makes me think of the instrument or a concert or, but something where it was a specific secular thing. 100% of the time, they also rated that instrument as distracting. So what they're associating the instrument with, is there's a high correlation between whether or not that makes it helpful or not. It didn't necessarily work the other way. If something was given a helpful rating, it did not always have a sacred thing associated with. It might have been a generic thing like peace or, happiness or something, right? And so something that was rated a 4 or 5 in terms of is it helping you pray was only given a sacred association 23.3% of the time. And if something was given a distracting rating, a 1 or a 2, it was only given a secular association 22.7% of the time. So, if it has a sacred or secular association, there's a really high chance that it's going to be rated helpful or not. But on the other hand, if it's rated helpful, only sometimes is it associated with something sacred. If it's rated distracting, only sometimes is it associated with something secular. Probably the most interesting thing that I discovered looking at these associations, that people have of the instruments with things, is that people who took the survey in Spanish never associated instruments with secular things. So not a single Spanish response was something along the lines of a bar or hippies or Doctor Who or anything like that. English-speaking Hispanics or Latinos did make those kinds of connections, but Spanish people who took the survey in Spanish did not. So that, I don't know what that means. I can only speculate, but that was quite possibly the most interesting thing to me that I found in this entire survey. All right. So when it came to, okay, what instruments do people actually find helpful or distracting? So there were lots of instruments around which there was some kind of consensus. So a consensus in this case is a group where every single major group rated this instrument as helpful or distracting. So the consensus instruments that everybody seemed to like, every single group, this would have been people who took the survey in English, people who took the survey in Spanish, people who took the survey, non-Hispanic or Latino, Hispanic or Latino, people who attended the Latin Mass. Every single instrument in this helpful category was rated as higher than 3 by every single one of those groups on average. Okay, so on average, all of the Spanish-speaking people, all the English-speaking people, etc., rated this as higher than 3. So these would be the pipe organ, the piano, the bowed strings, all the woodwinds except the clarinet, brass instruments, and bells. Every single group found these instruments helpful on average. There were obviously a few exceptions, but the average rating for all of these instruments was higher than 3. And in some cases higher than 4. I believe the pipe organ was rated higher than 4 by every single group, which is, pretty strong consensus that this is a helpful instrument. I have the exact numbers with me. If you're curious, I can look those up later. There were also instruments that everyone found to be distracting. Every single group, on average, rated these instruments as lower than 3, or in some cases even lower than 2, right? So there were lots of reviews rating for the chimes, the timpani, and the drum set. These all came out as lower than 3. I think the drum set was somewhere like an average rating of 1.5. There were a bunch of other instruments that were also rated as distracting by every group, but which got a lot less reviews. So this would be the jazz organ, accordion, panpipes, saxophone, xylophone, glockenspiel, vibraphone, hi-hat, cymbals, and block. So these are all instruments where there was some kind of consensus, either backed up by a lot of reviews or by just a few reviews, that these are distracting instruments. And there were also instruments that were liked by some groups and not others. So the guitar, the tambourine, the electric keyboard, and the rain sticks, if people who took the survey in Spanish or checked the Hispanic or Latino box, these were rated as higher than 3 by those groups, and then lower than 3 by the non-Hispanic respondents. So these were ones that were a little bit more controversial between the groups, ones where you wouldn't get a consensus across the board with the different groups for what these, whether or not these instruments helped you pray. So where does this controversy come from? I mean, so I looked at the associations that these instruments had with them to see if there were any patterns. Okay, what were the non-Hispanics associating these instruments with versus the Hispanic respondents? And those were wildly different, right? So, for example, if you had the acoustic guitar, for example, this would be an instrument that was well liked by the Hispanic or Latino respondents, not rated as highly by the not Hispanic or Latino respondents. The acoustic guitar among the this was where some of those associations with hippies and camping came up, right? That these were things that the non-Hispanic English-speaking people associated with the acoustic guitar, that the Spanish-speaking or Hispanic or Latino people didn't have those strong associations there. The electric guitar was one where it was like, okay, this is associated with things like bars, or some people even like listed specific eras with the word immorality afterwards for that instrument. So there's some strong associations here with things that are very secular that exist in some cultures, but not others. Another thing that came up was the settings that were used, right? So like this was a comment that sometimes people would make in their association box. They'd give it a rating and then they'd say, it depends on the settings, right? Or you would get responses that make sense with some settings but not others. So one English-speaking respondent found that the electric guitar made them think of Doctor Who. I can certainly think of electric keyboard settings that would make me think of Doctor Who, but I can also think of plenty of electric keyboard settings that would not make me think of Doctor Who. So these associations and kind of the way they, in a sense, were laid out differently among the different cultures might explain the different reactions that these cultures have to these specific instruments. It is possible to do enculturation badly. Not all enculturation is good. Enculturation can be done too quickly, not give enough time or thought to what you're doing. Enculturation can use bad translations. This was an issue brought up by the Mexican Bishops' Conference, for example. Enculturation can use unorthodox texts, right? In their effort to adapt things to a culture, they might use a text that doesn't actually reflect what Catholics believe. Enculturation can fall into tokenism. This is something that was brought up by the U.S. bishops, where something looks like it's included, but the inclusion isn't, doesn't really get the job done. Inclusion can use unworthy art. This was brought up by the Mexican Bishops' Conference, that, people might be tempted to, do a shoddy job on the composition, for example, because they're just trying to get something done. And enculturation can incorporate instruments that are more secular than sacred. This is an issue that it gets brought up, I think, by all three groups are concerned about this, as well as the Musicum Sacrum document from the Second Vatican Council itself. All right, so what would I recommend based on my study of the Diocese of Lincoln with this survey and what we discovered? What would I recommend? So first of all, I would encourage music directors, pastors, parish musicians to focus on those consensus instruments, especially the ones that everyone seems to be edified by rather than distracted. We've got quite a few instruments to choose from. There's plenty of variety of instruments that will please, both the English-speaking and the Spanish-speaking and Hispanic and Latino respondents, people at your parish. There's plenty of options for what's going to edify them, bring their hearts closer to God. There's also plenty of instruments on the list that lots of different groups of people find distracting, right? And I would encourage music directors, parish musicians, pastors, and stuff to be cautious in their use of those instruments, to really consider, okay, is this really what's going to lift the minds and hearts to prayer of the people in my community? There are also plenty of things to talk about. There's things I would want to learn more about, things that I think the different groups of people should definitely talk to each other about. So first of all, I would encourage people to learn more about the liturgical history of the guitar and some of these other instruments. The guitar especially, as I mentioned, has been used in the Mass for hundreds of years, especially here in the Americas, in those California missions. It's not something that just all of a sudden started happening in the 1970s. It's been going on for a lot longer than that, and something that I think more people need to be aware of. I think it would be great to talk about what are the appropriate styles and settings for the guitar and the electric keyboard. That bishop in Guatemala, Bishop Molina, he specifically mentioned electric keyboard settings as something that liturgical musicians in his diocese should be thinking about. What is this? What instrument am I making this thing sound like? And I think that's a great recommendation for us as well. I'd love for us to look into and have conversations about where do the secular associations come from for some of these more controversial instruments. Why is it that people who take the survey in English seem to have some very strong associations with some very secular things for certain instruments? Are these associations good or bad? Is it good to have an instrument that we think of as secular versus sacred or not? And then, of course, some ideas of things I want to learn more about. I would love to have a study like this with more results. I don't know if I will be doing that myself. I would love if someone else did it. But I'd love to have a survey with more than just 82 results. I would love to have a survey with a lot better Vietnamese response rates so we can kind of see how they react to these things. And I'd love to see what would happen if this survey happened in other dioceses too. If any of you have contacts in the, Diocese of Bismarck or Fargo, I'll be happy to send you my survey, and you can see what happens. I would love to look deeper into some of the controversial issues. I would love to get some interviews with people about their personal history and attitudes with some of the controversial instruments. Why does a particular respondent associate a guitar with camping or hippies? Why does one person respond really negatively to a rain stick and another person respond really positively? I'd love to get some of those stories, hear what some of those people have to say in more detail than they had room to do in this survey. I would love to I could do another look at the data I already have to see, okay, did people respond differently the more educated in music they were? Did people respond differently to the music if they had music lessons versus not? This was just data that I have in my survey, but didn't have time to look at or room to fit in the paper. And perhaps a similar study focusing on settings, right? Rather than focusing on instruments, like, okay, here's a different setting on the electric keyboard or the organ. What do you think of? How do you react? And perhaps something similar on musical style, right? How an instrument is played, what kinds of note combinations are used, and rhythms and all that stuff can make just as big of a difference in how someone responds as the instrument itself. I'm not sure what a study like that would look like, but I would love to see one. I'll end with this quote from Bishop Maria Alberto Molina, the guy from Guatemala. Sacred music is an anticipation on earth of the worship that the angels and saints give to God in heaven. May sacred song lighten our steps and help us to journey together with joy on the paths of the Lord. Just remembering that the whole point of this is to bring us closer to God through the music that we sing and hear. All right. Anybody have any questions? I'm seeing some clapping emojis. That's nice. Thank you, Dr. Gentry.
I have a question.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So, you had talked about that, like violins and stuff, that's helping us pray better or something like that. But a lot of times I don't think of violins as singing because you talked about that specifically, that we're singing or whatever. And so some of these instruments may just be playing as kind of meditation type thing. Um, was that delineated in the study, like vocal prayer versus, or just meditation music kind of?
Yeah, no, that was not in the survey. I did not ask people for different reactions based on like, is this accompanying a voice versus being played as an instrumental meditation. The church does permit instrumental music without voices in certain parts of the Mass, especially outside of Lent. So there's nothing wrong with using a violin as a meditation instrument if it's helping people pray. But I didn't ask about that specifically.
So if music is played during Mass, you're supposed to be singing to it?
No, you don't. Not if it's meditation music. No, meditation music is allowed. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the quote that you had that was so good, about does the sound distract from the purpose of the song? So kept thinking it was all related to just vocal music.
Yeah. I don't know if that bishop was considering that. He might have just been more focused on, okay, when you play this instrument with the voices, it doesn't work, right? And not really have thought about, okay, if you play without voices, how's that? Certainly not something my survey looked at. I'm not sure how that bishop in Guatemala or, some of the other documents would. I don't know how they would treat that. I just know that, using instrumental music without voices at certain points in the Mass is permitted outside of Lent. At the proper points, it is allowed. So, but you'd still want it to help people pray. If it's distracting, you wouldn't want to do it. Yes, Dr. Gentry.
Hi, Father Winter. How are you? Good to see your face again.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
I appreciate your fluency with your subject area and ability to speak. I don't know if you have any comment related to this, but when I was working in a public school, when I was teaching choral literature, the subject of Nahuatl and Catholicism coming, using it within the service like you're talking about, came up in a negative light. So what are your thoughts about that?
Nahuatl meaning like the language or?
Well, just the idea of some of the students came with a sense that I'm not going to voice my question very well, I don't think, but they had a negative connotation of the missionaries coming through.
Oh, sure.
Doing what you're exposing, and in the initial part of the lecture. How do you feel about all that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know enough to say whether or not every instance of inculturation like which instance of inculturation in the history of the church were well done versus poorly done. Like I wouldn't really know how to. I'm nowhere near well versed enough in the history of the particular places to say. I mean, I know that the California missions were, for example, were very successful at making converts. And from what I can tell, the Franciscan priests there generally treated the Native Americans better than the civil authorities did. But were these conversions because of the music or in spite of the music? Were those choices made well or badly? I really can't say. I just know that they were made. So this has a long history to it. So I would also be curious, these students who had this reaction, how close were they to this happening, right? Had these students become, were they maybe a little more Europeanized than the people they were talking about? You know, because
Well,
I
this
think
is
that, yeah.
yeah.
Go
By
ahead.
way of compliment, I mean you bring a whole lot to me, a whole lot more perspective. I had a student studying Oaxaca, and um, so and he spoke to the controversy of the of the religion being imposed. This is the way he put it.
Oh,
But
sure.
this gives me, instinctually, I had a counter reaction to that too. That there's another side to it. But what you present helps me think through both sides of the issue a lot better.
Yeah.
So it's, I guess, more than anything else, I'm just complimenting you
Oh, thank you.
on
Yeah.
bringing some forward some of this information.
Thank you. Yeah.
I really appreciated my camera's not working for some reason, so my kids were watching this with me, and they seemed to it held their attention quite well. So kudos. Um, the music examples you played, I thought were very appropriate and very good at just kind of like pulling us in, and really showing us what this is about. Um, I don't know. I guess not really necessarily a question. Um, But were there any correlations that you noticed between the respondents who said that they more routinely attend Latin Mass, or was that part of the survey and kind of their associations with some of the other instruments, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Frequency of attending the Latin Mass. What I mean, it was just a yes or no box, right? So
Right.
they could check if they attended it. That could be weekly. I had very few respondents who only checked that box. I had some, but very few. Let me see if I wrote this down. I'm not, I don't have the information right now of if, for example, if they were the ones who were putting in the most secular associations. There were definitely Hispanics and Latinos in that category of attending the Latin Mass. It was not just non-Hispanics and Latinos. There were Spanish speakers who checked that box too. So, but I can't, I wouldn't be able to tell you right now if they had a higher rate of putting secular things in that association box or not. It's possible.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I was just wondering because it seems to be maybe if anything, I don't know, if trying to see the most from the results that we have, but a larger sample size would obviously everyone would love that.
right, yeah.
Just everything. So yeah, thank you.
I might have it on a paper elsewhere. If I can find it before the end of the presentation, I'll let you know. But so anyway, yeah. Any other questions?
In your study of historical examples of enculturation, did you notice any continuity in instruments that were used in, like, the during the Age of Exploration, or from African American, the early use of African American styles within the Mass? Did you see anything that continues to the present time, or was that not apparent?
Yeah, I think. I mean, the all of these cultures, I think they kind of carry even today. They use percussion. There's you heard the rhythm in the examples, and if you came to my Spanish mass on a Sunday, you would hear more rhythm than you did at my English masses, both with uh, you know you'd hear it in the pitched instruments, but also with percussion. So there was a little bit of that. Yeah, and I think the use of the guitar through these places seems to have been pretty constant. I don't know of a break where it's like, oh yeah, they used the guitar in the California missions and then they stopped and then they started again. I don't think that happened. Yeah, I wouldn't say, I don't get a sense now that there's a lot of like native woodwinds, for example. Like I think you that Guarani example. When I was reading up on the music in there, they talked about some of the wind instruments that they would use. I have not heard those performed in church, to my knowledge. So I'm not. Yeah, I'll just stop there.
All right. Well, thank you, Father Winter. That was an excellent presentation. We'll stay on the line for just a few seconds to just kind of talk over things. But thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who attended today.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Good work.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to kick Dr. Mortensen off
Oh,
since he's on your committee, but that's okay. I think he's great with things. Yeah, so I would just say excellent job, very, very well presented. The animations that you did with the slides and the musical examples and showing the different parts of the survey were great. They really added to the presentation. So that was wonderful. And then let's see, what did I say here? Oh, you had a wonderful style of presenting all the way through, giving the facts, supporting the facts with the evidence, and just staying with a very pastoral approach. I like the fact that you kind of grounded it on the Guatemalan bishop's statement of the using instruments. And I liked the twist that you gave to his statement, that the use of instruments should lift the mind and heart to God. And you really kept it very focused on that all the way through. And, everything, all of the results, the recommendations, the further study things, I think were just spot on for where you are with the information that you have. So
thank you.
great job. Any questions or concerns that you have at this point?
Okay. What are my questions or concerns? So I guess do I? I guess what do I do with the drafts? Do I work on the main draft some more? Of the paper? Do I just send it in?
No,
I
you just send in you already submitted your final paper, didn't you?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I put
Yeah.
something in that
No,
spot.
you don't.
So
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. It's done.
okay. Yeah. We have our liturgy committee meeting on Monday. So with the bishop, and I invited all the people in liturgy committee, but none of them came. But maybe they'll watch the video before then. So,
Okay.
yeah. Will you send me like a video file like you've done before?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Dr. or Professor Mertz will take care of that.
Okay. Great. Yeah.
One thing I think when you're first talking about enculturation, you talk about the first enculturation moving in the movement to the Gentile world. The second enculturation, I don't remember if you stated it in your, I didn't look in the paper while you were talking, but just that is, so the first one is reaching out from the Jews to the Gentiles. The second one is reaching out from the European church in the age of exploration.
Right.
I don't know if you mentioned specifically the European church.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I did not say the word European there. I don't think.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful. You've done great work on this all the way through, and
Thanks. Yeah.
you did a great job on your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been an enlightening project for sure. Oh, this was my other question: last capstone, you had me write some kind of reflection when I was done. Do you want me to do that for this one too?
No, I think we've stayed a little more connected on this one in terms of the process and the project. So I think we're fine there.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess is this kind of the last thing then?
This is the last thing.
Oh
You
wow.
can
Okay.
check it off.
That's right. Yeah. I've been talking with Mrs. Mertz, and I'm gonna the main capstone. Oh my, the graduate capstone. I'm gonna do that in the fall. I'm basically repurposing my final project from my intro to grad studies in music class. And so I figured I'd just do it with Dr. Bernier because he wants to do it.
Right?
And he's already kind of familiar with the outline and everything. So, and he's not available till the fall. So just wanted to let you know that's the plan on that. So,
Wonderful. Congratulations.
yeah. So, yeah, but I'll be taking music history this summer, just like I have every other summer. So,
Great.
yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
take care and enjoy a little bit of extra free time now.
I will. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
See
Bye
you
now.
later. Bye.